preaching. Any different accent. You know, and she'll, like, part of her talk, she'll share a little bit. I do want to just highlight how after leaving here in South High, a couple blocks away, and actually she went to Anderson Open, very close to us, through 8th grade. She went to Wesleyan College in Connecticut, where of course she was one of the leading students, at least as far as I know. And then worked with a series of nonprofits, Fair Vote in DC, which has been really spreading ranked choice voting around the country, Sierra Club in British Columbia, Mary's Pence, which has worked on women's empowerment throughout the Americas, based here in St. Paul. And then she got several graduate degrees at the U, where again she was one of the leading students at the Humphrey School in Public Policy and Business and Finance at the Carlson School. And then she went on to work at Ecolab these past 5+ years, where she helped them develop a better system for reporting global quarterly earnings and better pricing, a more effective pricing strategies for the product. Whether that's better or not depends if you're buying or selling. But and in the midst of all that, she lived with us in Nicaragua, and then later as an adult in Berlin, Germany, and Beijing, China. And fortunately now we're very happy she lives a block from Kathleen Olson in a Stewart neighborhood with her husband and her 4-year-old son. And now she is, I thought I was teaching her. Now she's teaching me about community-minded finance. And I am one of her eager students in that area. And again, she is probably the world's leading expert in community-minded finance. And that could even be an objective statement in my mind. And so now you can perhaps join in being one of her students too. So Rebecca or Becca Trout from Blumenshine.
Okay, hi. Well, thank you so much, Dad, for that introduction. Right in the name, community minded, I don't think there can be any claims to leadership, or we can all be leaders in this kind of thing together. So yeah, so I'm Rebecca Troutman Blumenshine, daughter of Amy and Mike. How's this sound? Is this good?
Perfect.
Okay. Sister of Nate and mother of Valentine, who some of you might have met hanging out with Eli. I know he comes and helps and eats donuts here sometimes. I hear about it later. And I'm very grateful and honored to be welcome to speak with you all today. I'm just basically going to be trying out some ideas on you all to get some of your feedback and reaction. And I'm grateful to have been invited here, especially by Karen, after reading some things that I've been posting on my website, bothandfinance.com. And I don't have business cards or anything like that. I'm kind of still early in this journey of turning this kind of into more of a venture. But you can find out more on that website, bothandfinance.com, if you're intrigued by the things we talk about here today. And with that, I'll get into it. So I'm going to share some thoughts about community-minded personal finance. And I'm going to use the concept of the finance matrix, which I will explain to you to kind of set this up. But first, I'm going to share a little bit of my journey here, why I'm here talking about this today. So I'm going to explain a little bit about that. And then at the end, we'll have some time for this discussion, Q&A. And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts after I share all this. So first, I thought it'd be fun to share a little bit about my journey. It's really helpful that my dad gave the introduction he did, because now you know a little bit of my career path. And I thought I would share some sort of guiding questions that are related to how I got started thinking about these things. So one is that I have had this career that's in both the nonprofit social justice world and in the corporate finance world. And kind of a big question that I've been holding in my mind throughout kind of my life, going between kind of businessy spaces and social justice spaces, is this question of like, why do I feel so disoriented every time I move from one, like a businessy space to a social justice space? And I thought to make this a little interactive here, maybe we could do a show of hands. I'm curious if anybody else in this room has had experience of disorientation moving between spaces like this. All right. Okay, so some resonance and yep, okay. And then another part of my journey is that I recently turned 40 years old, and I'm at a time in my life where I do have to take seriously, unfortunately, like thinking about my retirement, thinking about saving and investing and making personal financial decisions related to thinking a few decades in the future, most likely, about my retirement. And I feel very trapped. I feel like decisions that I feel like as I look forward a few decades, the trends I see in the world that look like they would make the world not a good place for me to retire into, like from a social and environmental perspective. I feel like the very financial systems that I would be investing into to try to save for my retirement contribute to those negative trends that I'm seeing a few decades in the future. And you would think that all this hubbub about things like ESG and impact investing would be kind of a solution to that, would help me answer that problem. But I just feel very meh about ESG and impact investing.
What is ESG?
Oh, yes, thank you. Environmental, social, and governance investing. So it's kind of like a very hot topic in the using finance for good world right now.
So like social benefit?
Yeah, like socially responsible investing is another term that is used. Yeah. So I'm curious if anyone else kind of resonates with these kinds of questions in some way or another. Okay, good. Well, thank you. And then this is a little bit personal, but just to share that this is a guiding question for me. I'm at a stage, I did leave my job at Ecolab almost a year ago now, and I've been on a discernment journey around my own vocation. And the question that's really that I've been sitting with, because I know that I feel like called to be part of building a more fair and just economy. I'm just like sitting with, how do I fit in this movement? So I'm curious, not necessarily if this is a vocational question for you, but just like generally this theme, if this resonates for others. Yeah. All right. So this is great to hear that hopefully, yeah. Hopefully there'll be something here of interest to this group. So this is just to share a little bit of the approach I've been taking to kind of grapple with these questions and develop some tools to support myself in navigating these types of questions, and then hopefully support others. And I'm not going to go through this, but just to say that I have been deep on this journey. And one of the things I've been doing is writing. That's kind of how I started on this. And so originally that bothandfinance.com website was just a blog with some articles. And that's what my dad shared with Karen, and Karen read some of them and thought that the group here might be interested in what I've been writing about. So I'm going to share some of those things. But I will tell you now, this is just going to be kind of like a preview to what topics we could talk about and what I have on my site. And I did get some feedback from my father here of like what I should include, what people might be interested in here from my site. And if I were to have included them all, it would probably be like a 3-hour talk. So this is just going to be previews, but I hope if it piques your interest, you can check out the website. And with that, let's get into this idea of the finance matrix. What is the finance matrix? So this it's a drawing that I have found helpfoul. It's a way to categorize the overall field of finance across 2 dimensions in 4 categories. So I'll explain these dimensions. So here, this horizontal dimension across the bottom is related to what is our guiding motivation. And on the left-hand side, you can see we have a guiding motivation of individual accumulation. So that's like, we're talking about finance, so we're talking about individual capital accumulation. And then on the right-hand side, we have a guiding motivation of collective thriving. So that would be people or projects that are trying to use finance with a top guiding motivation for collective thriving. Now, as you can imagine, there's a lot of debate that can be had about just this spectrum, and there's a lot of questions we can ask. And I would say, like, to me, a big part of the debate that some of us, may have been hearing about within this world of ESG, environmental, social, and governance investing, and within the world of impact investing. Are others familiar with ESG and impact investing in this group?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
And have you? Yeah.
I know ESG, but not impact.
Okay. Yeah, they're kind of in the same category. And it's just the idea of using investing for a social or environmental impact, very loosely, broadly speaking. And there's a lot of debate about this. It's now become very politicized. And it's kind of interesting because it became politicized kind of suddenly, but there had been a debate, a very active debate about environmental, social, and governance investing and socially responsible investing in the walls of the finance world for a long time before that. And I can see my dad and my brother like confirming that, but then suddenly it broke
Only
out.
for 50 years.
Yeah. Suddenly it broke out into kind of more general awareness and continues to rage on. And kind of one of the big questions in that debate is it even okay? Is it even allowed? Is it even acceptable to consider using finance with a goal for collective thriving? And so as crazy as that may seem to some of us, that's a big debate. But that is just one dimension. And I think if we leave it there, we miss a lot. And for me, thinking about this other dimension of the finance matrix has really helped me understand and have some like aha moments about my own experience interacting with the world of finance, and also just like situating different things going on in the finance world for myself. So that's this other dimension I'm talking about is this vertical dimension here that I'm calling economic logic. And this is really about what are our underlying assumptions about how our economy works and how people work in our economy. So this one is actually similar to what I was saying about the ESG and impact investing being a hearty debate in the walls of finance before breaking out into kind of common awareness. This is currently a debate that is happening more, I would say, in kind of the more academic world of economics and just social sciences that are adjacent or similar to economics, and it's not as commonly discussed yet in the like collective consciousness, but I think that might be changing. So anyhow, so you heard it here first if you started hearing more about this, but it does make it harder for me to talk about. Like if you've been in the academic world where people talk about this, it's familiar to you, but if not, it's a little bit of a mind twister. But what we're talking about here is our underlying assumptions about how our economy works and how people work in our economy. And on the bottom side of the spectrum, we have what I'm calling old school textbook economics. And this is really the dominant assumptions in our world today about how our economy works. And these are like, one way to think about this is like the core assumptions that are taught and that people think about when they think of Econ 101 textbook economics. So it's things like independent, rational man, which people like my mom love. This idea of price, the price of something tells us the value of something, and the value of something can tell us the price of something. It's very circular logic, and it's very, very, very core to this old school textbook Econ 101 economic logic. And another feature of this logic is this idea that there is such a thing as laws of economics, laws that are like fixed in stone and just kind of happen, kind of like laws of physics.
Like gravity.
Like gravity, exactly.
Reagan's trickle down.
It is, but yeah, no, thanks for asking. Well, I'm referring, so this is where it can get really academic. So for those who are interested in this, I'll just say it, but if this means, if this is gobbledygook to you, just don't worry about it. But most people associate Reaganomics with neoliberal economics would be the name for that. And that is now incorporated deeply into a lot of what is taught in Econ 101. But mostly what is taught in Econ 101 that kind of underpins our mainstream finance world, and also a lot of mainstream consciousness about what is finance and economics, is what's called neoclassical economics. And that's really mostly what I'm talking about here. And that came out of a certain time period and cultural context that, was about 100 to 150 years ago. And these are theories that came from specific people based on specific context, but now they're taught as laws. They're not taught and they're not remembered. Importantly, they're not remembered as theories or ideas. They're remembered by our mainstream ideas about the economy as laws. So that's that side of the spectrum. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have everything else, which is a very broad category, but it's intentionally so. So this, we're really talking about everything that is not that Econ 101 dominant way of thinking about our economy. It's all other ideas about how our economy works and how people work in our economy. So we don't want to, I don't think it's useful to try to like characterize, say this is the list of characteristics, this is the one alternative logic that would be good for us to move to. No, I think it's really helpful to think about this as a space where there's many different logics, many different worldviews. But I would say there's a theme on this side, and the theme is recognition that we human people construct our economy, and we construct it based on the stories, the collective stories that we tell ourselves about how our economy works and how people work in our economy. So because of that, awareness about these collective stories is incredibly powerful and important. So that's the finance matrix, and that's just laying it out. And I have an article on my website about this where I go into what I think the implications are just for the broad field of finance, what I think is going on in these different quadrants, and just some more thoughts about that. But I don't have time to go into that and also be able to share a little bit about some other topics. So if you're interested, check out my article, but I will just give you the punchlines here and then we'll move on. So the punchline is that today, most of the field of finance is in what's shown by this bottom left box. Most of the field of finance is really kind of trapped in this particular way of thinking where there's this assumption that the guiding motivation is and must be individual capital accumulation. And there's this assumption that the way that the economy works is well explained by these Econ 101 old school textbook economic assumptions. And when you're in that world, it can be very, very hard to see outside of it. Some people in this world can't even conceive that there could be anything that is called finance that's outside of that box. But of course there is. There really is. And I'm going to jump to the chase of this top corner because that's the one that I personally am most interested in. And I just want, kind of one of the punchlines of this discussion is to just share that there really actually is a lot going on in this top right corner. And these are some of the names and some of the methods of things going on. And in case you can't read this, I'll just read a couple out. Things like solidarity economy, democratic economy, next economy, indigenomics, living economy, ecosystem thinking, donut economics. So just out of curiosity, has anyone curious how many in the room here have heard of at least one of the things? So I listed up here. Okay, awesome. So I don't have to convince you this part of the matrix exists, so that's good. So that's the finance matrix, and that's all to help us set up this concept of what is community-minded personal finance.
I think that's the question about the matrix.
Yeah.
That maybe you're getting to this, but when, like you say, almost everything, almost all thinking, almost all people are in this lower, right? So what happens to people financially when they choose to live in the upper? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like it feels to me like I think Korean is a more elegant language. It's a more accurate language. It reflects who I am better. So I could just choose. I'm just going to speak Korean, but I'm going to have like problems.
Yeah.
No one else is Korean.
That's a good setup.
That is the perfect setup. That's exactly what I'm talking about here. So yes, I am, yeah. Well, I don't have, this is the thing. I don't have answers. I do not have silver bullet or universal answers to any of these questions, and I don't think they exist. I think these questions are really personal, and in the world we live in today, we do face trade-offs, and we particularly face trade-offs when it comes to our personal finance decisions, when we're thinking about using finance for good and thinking about trying to move our economy to something that's more fair and more just. And that is the area that I am most interested in. So this is to set up this question that I've been holding of when it comes to personal finance, when it comes to my own financial decisions and things like saving and investing for my future, what is there anything that could possibly exist in the field of personal finance, in the field like thinking of personal finance as a field that like gives me information about that kind of thing, or professionals who work to help people with saving and investing and making financial decisions? Is there anything in that field for those of us who feel like we're represented by this green box here, for those of us who feel like our personal guiding motivation is at least some mix of being motivated by collective thriving, and for those of us who believe that the world is not kind of well described, and that's not really a story that we want to be part of nurturing, the story that is told by old school textbook economic logic. What is there for us? And as part of my journey that I shared that I've been on, I have come to the conclusion that there absolutely is stuff there for us. And I call it community-minded personal finance because I needed a name for it to help get my bearings. And kind of, I'll say now, like in retrospect, looking back on my journey that I shared at the beginning of all the learning and training and connecting with other groups working on this stuff, I would say I've kind of been in the process of of building my skill set in this area of community-minded personal finance. And now that's kind of what I've been working out in the pages of my website. And then now I'm working to share some of these tools and work with others who are interested in support in being in this space. But the thing is, it's not that easy to find. If you go out and look for personal finance information, if you look for just like general support around making decisions, for example, about saving and investing for the future, by far the most dominant thing you will find is personal finance information that is kind of stuck in this bubble of what I call status quo personal finance. That's really encircled or kind of entrenched in these ideas that in kind of like a worldview that believes that the only thing that personal finance can be is that which is assumes the guiding motivation is at the end of the day individual capital accumulation, and that which does not question this old school textbook economic econ 101 logic. And so on my site, I have another article and a video called What is Community-Minded Personal Finance, where I go through describing some sort of core characteristics that I think can help us determine when we're in a world that's more community-minded personal finance versus when we're in more of a status quo personal finance space. And I don't have time. I'm like trying to make sure that we have time for conversation. But I know I don't have time to talk through all of them. But I want you to know that that's a resource you can check out if you're interested. And I want to share a personal story to just kind of represent this a little bit and to move us into more discussion and Q&A time. So my personal story is that when I was in my MBA program at the Carleton School at the University of Minnesota, one of the courses I took was on entrepreneurship, and this course was like they kind of like prided themselves on being really open and curious, and the idea was you're supposed to have big bold ideas and a hypothesis and then go test it in the market or just test it with people, see what their reaction is, and iterate and don't have any assumptions, et cetera, et cetera. This was the vibe of the course. And as part of the course, you did a project. And so I had a project and I had an idea, I had a hypothesis, and part of it was that I needed to go speak with the professor one-on-one and like talk about my idea and hypothesis. So I had this one-on-one meeting with the professor of this course. And when we started the conversation, it was going great. You know, you could tell it was very open. She was very excited she seemed like very enthusiastic about what I was working on. But as we were speaking, it became clear that she wasn't quite understanding what my hypothesis was. It became clear to me that she thought that I wanted to try to build some kind of tool or solution for very wealthy people and institutions who might want to do impact investing. And in this case, again, to the what is impact investing, was very loosely defined thing of like just doing investing that is not on Wall Street, that is like doing well and doing good. So like maybe investing in the community or investing in things that are good for the environment or social things. And she was very supportive of this. But I said, no, that's not my project. That's not my hypothesis. My hypothesis is that there are just regular people, not the top 1%, who would be interested in some alternatives for their retirement savings that are off of Wall Street and that have some environmental and social purpose. And it was like the vibe in the room changed. It was like her brain could not comprehend like that. And I think her response was, well, you can't do that. That would be irresponsible. And it was like this shutdown of the conversation entirely. And so much so that I couldn't pursue it for that project, and then I did something else. But I really think that was an example of her worldview being trapped in this circle. Because now fast forward, 5-6 years later, I have taken the time to really explore that hypothesis. And the answer is there's a lot of people interested in this. And yes, it's very complicated. And therefore we need even more support. And part of the way that I got involved actually in the beginning was that there's this group called Radical Financial Planners that kind of specifically has alternative economic viewpoints and supports clients with these types of viewpoints. And they were saying, we have way more clients than we can serve, and we need more people to come into this space. So there's absolutely evidence of desire for this kind of thing, but it's not well worked out. So that's what I'm working on, and that's what I'm working out on my website. And with that, I'll move into discussion. I'm not going to tell you why it matters. We can discuss why it matters, though. So these are some questions I thought maybe you could reflect on and we can discuss together. But really, I just think any questions or thoughts that have come up. Yeah.
So back in the dark ages, I studied economics at the University of Cincinnati in the 70s.
Yeah.
And Adam Smith, John Maynard Keynes, they were all theories. They were not laws. And I went to the College of Liberal Arts, right? It was not in the business college.
Yeah.
Is that the issue that happened? They moved the economics department into the business college. So is that why it's so rigorous now and unable to change? Because it's no longer a social science, but a business practice.
Yeah, I think. Well, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I am a recovering econ major. That's something that I talk about a lot because I have come over the 5.5 years that I've been out of school to really understand the shortcomings of my education and how terrible it was in a lot of ways. But I went to Luther College, to liberal arts college. Our econ department was pretty terrible. And not just ideologically, but also pedagogically and diversity wise and in many other ways. But yeah, I would try to bring up ethics in class and I'd be told that's not relevant. We can't talk about that here. And so we would be talking about the statistical value of a human life and Superfund sites. And I would be told we can't talk about the ethics of this. We have to stick to the economics. And it was wild. And they really the professors tried their darndest to just beat out of me the idea that humans have a responsibility to each other, or that humans might be motivated by anything other than financial reward.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of dynamics going on, and I'm so glad that I'd be very curious to hear more of your thoughts as a recovering economics major too. But a big part of my journey has been learning more and more about just how it came to be that these particular economics ideas dominate our world so much right now. And one of the kind of weird mysteries about it is that if you do talk to people deep in the economics field, they will point out, oh no, like the ideas taught in Econ 101 are just theories, they're simplifications, they're assumptions. Like you talk to econ, like leading economists will say, like, oh, Econ 101 should totally change. Some of them will admit it should totally change. It's misinforming people. And yet, so that debate is happening. And there's economics students who are rising up and saying we need to stop teaching this stuff in econ. It is like not just wrong, it's causing deep damage. So this stuff is happening. And but it has not trickled into the world of finance, like almost not at all. Like if you look at, I've been doing the certified financial planner training. I know Nate's done the CFA and my dad too, so you can probably speak to this, like the standard trainings for financial professionals, the way they teach economics there and what you have to answer on your test to be a expert in finance, are these exact, very simplified laws of economics. So that's one way that they're so ingrained right now, but sorry.
In your motto, I'm a previous one. And when I worked with people, what I found is that at the bottom of people, I had to work with the issue of fear. Will I have enough? And if that doesn't get worked through, like, none of this can get worked through.
Yeah,
So in your model, how are you working with that human fear of, and I don't, also a fear of, I don't want to be stupid. So,
Yeah.
if I were, no, I mean,
no,
Yeah.
huge.
like I screwed up, I did social justice things, and now I don't have enough in retirement. There's so many fears. How do you, in this model of community minded, even as a church, if our council or our reparation team is working with how much should we give to our local neighborhood or something, how do you work with the fear of, well, what about our furnace going out and our roof? How do you work with that within this model?
Oh, those are the biggest themes, like these themes around enoughness and finding our personal enoughness, and themes around working through our scarcity, fears of scarcity, and themes around, like I have a colleague in the space who's a math professor at Berkeley University, and is like on a mission to get this idea of math supremacy to be understood, because it's a way, these are problems, and they are a way that kind of like power works in our world today, that can keep us sort of trapped. And those are all themes that I do not believe that there are cookie cutter or universal answers about, but we truly can come to a sense of balance for ourselves around those things. And it's not going to happen overnight because of all these dynamics, big social dynamics. And it's going to be different for each of us individually because of our different kind of positions within these big social dynamics. But we can get better support around it and have better tools and resources and be talking about it much more than we currently do. And the personal finance field, I believe, is doing a huge disservice by not offering this mostly yet for people. And so that's what I'm really interested in.
Can you say maybe more about when you have and underlined there between personal and collective? When you're
Yeah, I'll get to that. I just want to get some of the other ones. Yeah, so we're going.
It's really difficult, for Black and brown people, many Black and brown indigenous people to think about and to talk about finance without separating the value of, capitalism and the value of human labor.
Yeah.
And the value of all of that entrenched in hundreds and hundreds of years of so, I have to filter through all of that and sit here and listen to people talking about finance and economics and wonderful universities and schools and thoughts and stuff. But inside, I'm cringing because it's excruciating the fact that we monetize human beings.
Yeah.
And we always have, and we may always will. So it's just,
Thank you for sharing that. And that we monetize our natural world too. Yeah, and so that's why, there has been some of these, trends that I talked about. There are some things in this like top right-hand corner space that like say things like the new economy. And there's been pushback on wording like that because so much of the ideas that are kind of undergirding work in this alternative economy space that's focused on collective well-being are really ancient and often indigenous ideas. And yeah, it's thank you for sharing that.
We all do better when we all do better.
Yeah.
I spent the last 20 years of my working life doing fundraising, mostly planned giving. And dealing with people who live kind of along that continuum on the bottom. So they were people who had involved in individual communities, but they were also philanthropic. But when you got to talking with them about what they were gonna do with that individual accumulation when they were gone, the notion of continuing that philanthropy after they were gone wasn't there. And lawyers don't talk to, estate planning lawyers, they don't talk to them about it. Financial planners don't talk to them about it. And so part of the effort, the professional fundraising in that area was to try to get this conversation in place. So that at least the notion of collective thriving, with maybe that double-ended arrow tilting a little bit up toward the top corner, continuing. But in the records of us, the American population that does have something to share at the end of their life, sharing it so about
Yeah, so, and then Dad, you had asked, just, that's kind of related to this question of just. So one of the characteristics I think that we can look at, I think that kind of helps us like a guidepost to know if some resources we're engaging, some personal finance resources we're engaging are in status quo or community-minded personal finance, is how the concept of financial responsibility is treated. And what I've noticed is in like mainstream status quo personal finance spaces, it's, first of all, it's a fixed definition. You can just go on the internet and they're going to tell you, this is what financial responsibility means. And it's going to be something that's just basically about taking care of yourself and your immediate like nuclear family dependence. And it's going to be very siloed, and there's going to be no sense of like importance of understanding your context in broader social, environmental or historical systems. And in the community-minded personal finance space, on the other hand, there's this recognition that what is financial responsibility can be a personal definition for each of us. And of course, we have this on the collective side, so it's going to involve some combination of responsibility to ourselves and to some like collective responsibility. And there's at least some recognition of what is our individual context within systems of wealth distribution, and histories of oppression and so forth. And how that plays into what our personal definitions of financial responsibility are. And there's going to be openness and curiosity to hear that from each other and to talk about that, which is just not a current characteristic of like your traditional personal finance spaces.
Can I just say that in your writings on your blog, you what is personal and collective is very different. I mean, I think of Rico's point, you make the point in one or two of those pieces about for those that have had wealth stolen over generations from them, focusing on personal wealth building is in a way part of collective thriving. So I don't know if you, it's not, there's just many reasons.
And then for those of us in positions where we've benefited from, white privilege and stealing of land from Black and Brown communities, for a lot of us, we can't separate what is responsibility from an acknowledgement of that and including that into how we think about our personal financial decisions. So yeah.
I feel like you're proposing an alternative paradigm, and I'm not quite getting it. Yeah. So let me give you an example. Like, there are people in the room, more than a couple, who participate in the ELCA pension fund. My guess is a pretty high percentage of us are what they call the social conscience fund. So we don't invest in tobacco, we don't invest in maybe gambling, right? This is way down in your far left corner still.
Yeah, that's kind of what yeah, I have another picture of it here. That's what I talked about in my, finance matrix article. But I kind of think that that's been an aha moment for me of like, why do I feel so meh about things like socially responsible investing that's in public markets? Public markets are Wall Street. That's what most of ESG and socially responsible investing like that fund are in. Those companies that are in public markets, those represent 1% of the companies in the United States. And they're very, very large corporations. And so, yeah, doing a little bit better in like with what we select
lower right.
in those companies is something, but it just doesn't feel inspiring to me personally. And so I kind of think like generally those ESG, I keep calling it ESG, but like what you're talking about, like retirement options that are in public market companies, but are trying to be like more socially responsible. I put them in the most of finance or weak solutions categories. Like I just don't, I think part of the reason we're not seeing the kind of transformative change, despite the fact that there's like maybe almost a third of all of the assets under management in the world are in these types of so-called environmental, social, and governance strategies. We're not seeing transformative change from that. And I think it's because we're still trapped in this economic logic. We're not pushing the envelope there the way we need to be, but yeah.
Can you say in a sentence, what, just describe the new paradigm?
No, because I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
Because I really believe that having one specific new paradigm is not gonna get us there. That we need to have a mindset where we're open to many. But that, yeah.
I was a financial advisor at Thrivent for a couple months, and one of the things that you just mentioned of a social investing, I brought up to my superiors and the people that I worked under, and they were like, well, yeah, we kind of have that, but you know, this other stuff is usually what we should do. And, you know, it's that they'll make more money, you know, their investments will be better off if they do this. And I was very like, well, shouldn't we, if a client wants to do that and wants to do even more than just that, shouldn't we be doing what they want to do instead of, you know, kind of pushing them through? And that it was really scary for me, because I was like, that's not why I signed up to do this. I signed up to,
Yeah.
you know,
Congratulations.
yeah.
Yeah. And what's so interesting there is that it's the client's money that you're talking about, but then it filters through these financial intermediaries where it's like the position you were sitting in, and these desires to be up more maybe in the top right corner of a matrix like this get moved, get pushed back into that most of finance box by our financial intermediaries based on what we're taught. So.
Yeah.
So I can't help but bring like our scripture stories like in conversation with this matrix, and some of you are probably doing that too, but I feel like Jesus is all about like busting the old paradigm and like bringing us into the new paradigm of the reign of God, where it's like in that collective thriving place. And you know, you can think about the story of Zacchaeus, who's like at first stuck in that first bottom box, right? And then he has this encounter with Jesus and he gives away half of his wealth. And some of that is out of a sense of responsibility, those he's defrauded. And Jesus says, salvation has come to this house. He's like now in that new paradigm. And then thinking about the story of like manna, you know, and the people being liberated from Egypt. And some of them are like, we want to go back to Egypt because at least then we knew where our food was coming from. Like there was a surplus economy that we could at least like eat the scraps of. And that's better than being in this like place of questioning and wandering where it's like, okay, how do we live just like trusting in God's provision day by day? And, you know, then God provided manna and says, you can't hoard it for yourself or it's going to rot. It's going to rot. You can only collect enough for the day.
And God giving that assurance always that like there is enough, like trust there will be enough. I would love, as a community of faith to dig into this matrix more in conversation with some of our scripture stories, because I feel like there's been an ancient, pattern of like that paradigm of like focused on ego and self-preservation being busted into a new reality, and we get these glimpses of what that can look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Well, Martha, to that,
Yeah.
I wish I found that day. I see like what's happening to the Palestinians or poverty, the encampment. And I think, well, I don't know, that I think that we just get taken care of. And I think that our family, I have fear for Sam.
Yeah.
So my finances come out of fear. Driving, you have money. You don't think there's a paradigm. You think there are maybe multiple paradigms. I suck at math and finances, and I hate it. So I want someone to tell me what the hell to do, and I'll just do it. I'm a right person. Stop. And I don't know where else. So I get prepared. I think there's multiple paradigm, whatever. So telling somebody what to do, somewhat safe, because I got a kid with a disability that's got to live after I die, and that's what I'm doing. Jimmy, can I just say that? What? I mean, you were good at it. I don't want to spend any time. Yeah, that is not. Well, I can't, I have a problem. Like, and Brad doesn't like it. So they were stupid drivers. They have to tell us all this shit that we know. I don't like those.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm so scared. Very on the word that.
There's a risk that we can do wrong. There's a risk that we can do. There's a fear about our own safety. Definitely. But even still get back. Yeah. Yeah. And take the risk, we might lose, but we might take the risk. Yeah, in the reality, if you lose in that moment, or I mean, yeah, you lose there. Yeah. Well, yeah. So maybe. Yeah. So thank you.
Is there a sense in the room that we want to have Rebecca back?
Yeah.
Dig into this more. Can I see show of hands? We want to invite her back. Okay, absolutely.
The final paradigm.
So much.
Yeah.
From in here.
Yeah, I mean, I use that.